You're listening to the Business Artist Podcast. My name is Jan Mehlhose. Today our guest is Stefanos Sifandos. Stefanos helps people to reach and unleash their full potential and also to heal. He has great insights into the masculine and the feminine soul. He's worked with Olympic gold medalists, with some of the best fighters of the planet, and he's helping them also to transform and to expand. And he has developed highly effective methods to master masculinity and to master relationships. Stefanos, thanks for being guest today in my podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, my friend. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling connected. I just had 2 hours of rolling, 2 hours of jiu-jitsu. I've started that, and I'm at the beginning stages of learning. I come from martial arts background, more boxing, a little bit of Muay Thai, more striking, and so the jiu-jitsu is very new because it's such an intellectual game, so much thinking, and it's very confusing. And I feel like I'm learning my body all over again. So it's good fun.
Yeah, I mean, is it Brazilian jiu-jitsu or?
Correct. Yes.
Why is it so? I mean, it seems like all the people I'm listening to, they're doing it or start doing it right now. Why is it so hyped right now? What's the magic about it? Why is it so different?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's so different about it. I think it's because here it is with striking sports. It's of course there's technical aptitude that's very important,
Mhm.
but a lot of it comes down to who's faster, who's stronger, who's a more skilled athlete. Sure, but it is really about power, strength, speed, etc. Of course, there's technical ability that's required,
Mhm.
spacing, positioning, all of that.
Mhm.
With jiu-jitsu, if you're very adept, if you understand the body, it's all about levers and fulcrums and positioning and creating space. It really is like a game of chess, and you have to think multiple moves in front whilst your body is under duress. So for me, while we're speaking to masculinity, to me,
Yes.
that's something that's very, very important, very intriguing. And to me, that's a big part of the masculine condition, is to be able to, masculine men learn through challenge, and we learn through adversity.
Mhm.
You could say it's part of our DNA. It's part of our evolutionary biology. It's part of how we've adapted to this world. And so there's something very innate and almost, I want to say, natural about being in a compromising physiological position and having
Mhm.
to think your way and feel your way out of it. And so it's just very different to stand-up striking sports that I've been involved in the past.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit of when I was surfing sometimes, and I went, out far out in the ocean, and I
Mm,
really had to get in the right position in the water to let
mm,
myself flow back again, and I really had to think
mm.
hard because otherwise I would maybe die. But then
Yeah.
after that, I was in such a great state when I came out of it. It was amazing. Yeah,
Mm, mm. I love that. I
it's a
love
great
that.
feeling after.
Yeah.
Yes, but so masculinity, to be honest, I have never heard about a movement or something else to masculinity about until about 1 year ago. I was actually at the summit in LA, and there was, I don't know if you know the guy, Dan Doddy in Los Angeles.
No,
No.
no, I don't. No.
Anyway, he's one coach, and he did a masculinity workshop. And basically, what we did there was that men were standing next to each other, and I think we said, if you would really know me, and then one secret about us, and
Yes.
then we also had to look each other in the eye, which was very uncomfortable. Very close to men, looking them long term in the eye, somebody you don't know, and I don't know. After that, my friend who did it also, he said, he was like for a year or something, he felt his shoulders hurt and stuff. And after that, he was totally relaxed. And also on me, it had a great impact. And then I started to look more into it. And then I found out there's actually quite a movement. There's a lot of thoughts behind it. There's ancient wisdom in it, but it's not in the mainstream at all. Can you maybe explain a little bit more about sacred masculinity and how the difference is between the masculinity which we know normally people think maybe that's boxing, that's being the boss at home and stuff like this?
It's a very big question, my friend. It's a loaded question. It's a great question that you're asking. There's also so much more to masculinity than eye gazing perhaps, but in fact, the role that eye gazing is a tool. Revealing a vulnerability and a secret about who we are is a tool for connection. Ultimately, what that expression or that part of masculinity is saying is that men need men that they can trust. That's part of the sacredness of masculinity. We require men that we trust. And so there's cultural inferences that govern that school of thought and that reality, that truth. And there's also biological inferences. We've relied on each other, men particularly, for survival, for extreme in the moment survival for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. And so when men are in a time today where so many men feel isolated and alone, where so many men feel disconnected from their truth, they have no one to rely on, to lean on, to share with, there's something that's innate within us that feels missing. So we feel empty, we feel there's a void within us. And what most people try and do to fill that void is we try to feel good. And so we look to short-term gratifying experiences such as alcohol, such as drugs, such as television, such as food, such as pornography, sex, womanizing, whatever it may be. And we pursue these in extreme ways because there's two reasons why. The behavior becomes addictive, physiologically, psychologically, emotionally. But what's also happening at a brain physiology level, at a neurological level, is that we require more of the same stimulus to receive the same response. And so we're happy with feeling good, and so we want to feel good more, and so we need more of that. And then that's one of the reasons. But the other reason is because we're also in avoidance. So we're avoidance of feeling bad. So there's two prongs that are happening there, two-prong approach, where they're largely unconscious, and we're just driven towards this unhealthy, unsustainable, extreme behavior. And so we're starting to see that male contact, sincere male contact, is very important. It's not so much about eye gazing. It's not so much about sharing secrets, although that's important actually, because we're allowing ourselves to be seen in front of people that we trust. It's a part of it, but it's more about having very real male friendships. And that's part of sacred masculinity. Now that contributes to part of the foundation for men being healthier men in the world, and for men being able to engage in sacred masculinity per se, which again is quite a subjective term depending on who you speak to. Now, I'll say one more thing before I pause. We have to understand that there are many influences that make us who we are. And so, for example, when we're speaking to masculine, feminine dynamics, there are three components or three aspects to masculine, feminine. It's layered and it's more complex than we think. So yes, masculinity and femininity, the expressions of these ways of being in the world, reside within every human being. So part of it's biological. There's masculinity and femininity that's a link to our biology and our environmental, and then there's the cultural or environmental conditioning of masculine and feminine. And then there's the polarity of masculinity and femininity. And so as we're talking about sacred masculine, there's so many ways that we can talk about that. And then we layer that and we couple that with, okay, we've evolved in a particular way, and where we are today is very different to where we were 500,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 50, where we were more based in survival, where the environment was so tumultuous that we had to focus on surviving. Now, our quote unquote state of consciousness, our spirituality has expanded. And for most of us, at least most of us in the Western world, we're no longer concerned with safety so much. We're more concerned with expanding ourselves, understanding ourselves. We have this ability to think in the future, in the present, in the past. And how we do that, how we interact with ourselves is different. People are looking for more meaning. And so the sacredness of masculinity is also changing. That landscape is changing. Is that making sense?
Yes, it makes absolutely sense.
Yeah.
I would like to go into something you said, go deeper into it, because the polarity. So
Sure.
Today, obviously, because we are not fighting for survival and women have a different place in society, um, many people say that the polarity is even in an unhealthy way changed, that female, like women are often very masculine and men have a lot of feminine elements, and this is not really the right, even for me and my wife, for example. We've been at one workshop and then we got the feedback that our polarity is, we have to work on our polarity a little bit. I don't even know why they got the impression, but maybe, I mean, I let her talk and then I talked after, but for me, that was just the normal way to speak. But anyway, I got this reaction, and I've heard this also on this, when I heard like reports on our society, that, for example, in Sweden, the polarity is totally out of order. Is that true, or what is your insight about that?
Again, a very complex topic
Yes.
that many social commentators are attempting to simplify and assume a reductionist approach to something that's very complex and very layered. And that's not my way of getting out of answering the question. I'm going to answer the question.
Yeah.
Um, uh, some authors are tackling this in a different way, and scholars are tackling this in a different way, and we're making some sense of it. To answer your question, in certain parts of society, there is a movement towards, there's a confusion around men being men. Men are confused about what they need to be and how they need to be. When we look at the causes of this or the reasons for this, there's a couple of reasons. There's some things that have contributed to this. And this isn't about good and bad. This is just about observing what's happened and how our culture has changed over the last 50 to 100 years. The various waves of feminism have impacted this. Our understanding of what's healthy and unhealthy, instead of just what has been waves of family dynamics the last 100 years, has impacted this. Men are at a place where they're hearing women say, be more compassionate, be more empathetic, be more understanding, be more emotional, etc., etc. These are feminine virtues, or feminine, not virtues, rather feminine expressive characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And so men wanting to naturally have sex and wanting to, and also not just being driven by sex, but driven by intimacy and closeness, and also wanting to have family, etc., etc., whatever their values are saying, well, maybe I need to change. And so they change. But what's happening is females are then repelling that type of man because he's quote unquote too feminine. And so we're starting to see that there's an issue. There's not necessarily a completely natural state to masculinity and femininity, but there's an attraction and a magnetism that comes with being a particular way. For example, when a man is confident and certain in his posture, when he is purposeful in his way of being in the world, when he's creating in the way that he's creating and he's focused on that, and he's able to emote accurately, relevantly, in context to what's important in that moment, that's attractive. Having a man that is hyper emotional is not attractive. But we tend to do this as a humanity. We tend to move in extremes. The pendulum is swinging, where there was great, not so much oppression, although that did occur. There was oppression that occurred with it wasn't men against women, but there was a female voice that was suppressed. Now, not saying now that the male voice is suppressed, but what's happening is men are swinging quite violently, and I don't mean they're being violent, I mean in an extreme way, to the other end of the pendulum, where they're becoming very hyper passive. Mm-hmm. And that's not, every woman I speak to, that's not what a woman wants. When I give her options, hey, would you want a man that's really passive and indecisive, or would you prefer a man that is clear on his needs and stands up for what he believes in and is able to express that with clarity and calmness and discernment? Every woman I speak to says, oh, the latter is what is attractive to me. So it's saying something about our position in the world and in society.
Mm. And I think maybe there's also to do to reach this state as a man, what you mentioned before, that there's a lot of distraction and we want short-term happiness instead of working inside of us. But for example, I mean, I do have, I think, a lot of good real male friends, and I trust them, and they also have no business connections, so it's really just friendship. But still, I see myself, trying to find short-term satisfaction and distraction. So what if one, or if I feel that I want to make myself short-term happy with some distraction, what should I do instead? What would be a healthier way for me?
Have clarity on your what's important to you as a man. So part of man's purpose is to be busy, quote unquote, busy with his hands. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is that he's creating in the physical world something of importance to him. And that forms part of his purpose. Your individual expression and what you focus on is maybe the other part of that. But part of the overarching purpose of man, of being a man, is to literally be building and creating with our hands.
Mhm.
And so if you are clear on what that is for you and you're committed to that cause, you will be less likely to be distracted. Therefore, you'll be less likely to go into places of, oh, I'm just going to stop and watch porn and masturbate because what I'm doing is boring, what I'm doing is too difficult, or you've got to learn about yourself as a man as well. Learn how to challenge yourself. Are you challenging
Mhm.
yourself too much? Because we can do that as men, as people, human beings, full stop. Because again, again, there's aspects to the human condition. There's the human condition, and then there's the cultural conditioning, and the not just but the demographic conditioning as well. So men will experience life differently to women. Our hormonal profile is different. Our brains are wired, are structured slightly differently. So there's all these influences that are impacting us. And so it's important to understand that when you get clear as a man on what's important to you and you act that in the world, you will be less distracted. You'll be less prone to moving towards things that just don't really interest you.
Mhm. Regarding porn, what would you say it's the best not to watch porn at all, or what do you think is a healthy way
Mm,
to? Because I mean, this porn is like the top 7 websites in the world are all porn. So I think
correct.
that most of the men watch porn and women too. So what is
Mm,
a healthy way to
mm.
relate with porn?
Well, it's an interesting topic, this one. I've been doing a bit of research into this. Some studies are saying that watching pornography doesn't have a negative effect on our sense of self. If anything, it actually has a healthy or positive effect on our sense of self,
Mhm.
um, in our overall well-being, our social connections, the way we perceive ourselves and understand ourselves, the quality of those social connections, the health of them. It's hard to say. My personal opinion is that pornography is not really healthy, and I'm going to say why. There's a few reasons why, and I probably won't go into all of them right here, right now.
Yes.
However, the core reason is because as a collective society, we're quite immature. And so because we're immature as a collective society, we we don't know how to hold that in an appropriate way. Nuclear energy is an example of that. If we were a more, let's call a more evolved society, if we had a greater level of awareness, we'd realize that nuclear weaponry is so fucking dangerous because it's self-destructive. We can literally blow up a planet with nuclear weapons if it's done properly. And so the fact that we're moving to create nuclear weapons instead of harnessing nuclear energy in the most effective way, and again, that's another conversation, right?
Mhm.
We don't have to just use uranium. There's other forms of energy that have a shorter shelf life and that are more, um, that are not as toxic, and that the waste product isn't toxic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's another conversation, right? But
Mhm.
you see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
pornography isn't used in the way that it could be used. Pornography doesn't depict, it doesn't depict what real life sexual interaction and connection is really about. The other part to that is that it prays and I don't, when I say it, I don't know if there's someone after, on a very, in a high building, sitting in a big chair, pulling strings on puppets. What I mean by that, by default, by the beast that it is, it tugs on the insecurities of people. So what I mean by that is that we are a more socially connected society than ever, and we're globalized and we're international, yet we're so disconnected as a society. And men feel that. Like when we speak to men in pornography, when they're watching pornography, there's no performance anxiety. The woman is always happy, or whatever you're watching, the person is always satisfied. They're never talking about your body, that they don't like your body. They're not energetically being different. They're not worried about the size of your penis. They're not, or the shape of it, or what it looks like, or if it's hard, or you're always going to the woman or the man or whatever you want. They're always going to be satisfied. It gives this false depiction, but beyond that, what it means is that men don't have to deal with rejection, humiliation, abandonment, the hypercriticism. And so pornography is a very easy outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when we couple that with short-term gratification, we have this recipe for something being very, very attractive and very ease of access. Couple that with technology and the internet and 4G and 5G and fast bandwidth, and all of a sudden, and couple that with artificial intelligence and add robotics to that, and have a look at the sex dolls that are being created now for both men and women. It's like, wow. I mean, do you even need a human being anymore? People are asking this question. It's easier because people don't want, that's the short-term gratification also means that we're avoiding challenge and pain. Remember what I said at the beginning, men thrive in challenge and they thrive in discomfort, actually.
Mm-hmm.
A healthy man will use that as a tool for growth. An unhealthy man will use it as a tool of as a modality of avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're avoiding feeling uncomfortable. We're avoiding feeling pain. Or we don't want to wait for the bread to cook in the oven or over the fire. We want to put it in a toaster. I'll give you an example. We want everything now. Yesterday, we want it yesterday. The internet, if it's a bit slow, we get angry. Oh, what's going on with this thing? We get frustrated. We want everything now.
True.
And so
Yes.
we don't want to argue. We don't want to have conflict. But what we don't realize is that when we talk about polarity,
Mm-hmm.
you can't know peace without conflict. And so we need a level of conflict to understand ourselves. How, capitalize HOW, how we deal with that conflict is what defines us as a humanity and as consciousness in motion, in physical motion. It's the how that's fucking important, which is what we're missing. But if we're avoiding all the time, we never get an opportunity to go into the how in a healthier way. And so we develop these habits of unhealthy avoidance. So you're getting the map that I'm laying out for everyone, yeah?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So in the end, then it probably leads into unhappiness, emptiness, loneliness, weakness.
Yes, correct. Yeah,
That
and we
is the key.
perpetuate more of that because that becomes familiar. That
Yeah.
becomes the norm.
Understand. Why is it important not to ejaculate, and not always to ejaculate? Why is it important to keep it in the body many days?
Yeah, so again, depending on who you speak to, there are various schools of thought to this. And from a Western medical standpoint, they suggest regular ejaculation a number of times a week, 3 to 4 times a week is healthy, somewhere around there, I believe. If you speak to maybe certain Taoist traditions, they would very much say otherwise. Eastern mystic traditions, various Eastern Indian, ancient Indian traditions will say to hold that seed within us because that's life force energy. Ancient Egyptian traditions have a different view where you can release the sperm. However, there's a particular breath that you would engage in as you're ejaculating that holds the part of the life force energy within you. So the essence per se is within you. However, the fluid is released. So it depends who you speak to. I think it's healthy for various reasons to engage in forms of abstinence on a regular basis. I think it helps. I've practiced this many times myself. For lengthened periods of time, where it's given me a new perspective on myself. It's helped me understand who I did a video on this on Instagram the other day. It will be up on IGTV in the next 1 or 2 weeks. Where it really helped me understand myself. It deepened my relationship to my sexuality. It shifted how I saw the opposite sex, how I viewed the feminine, how I viewed women, how I treated and communicated with women. it helped me understand and give me a new perspective on my relationship to my penis, to my genitalia, and also to my habits that I was creating, whether it be self-pleasure, masturbation, or whether it be pursuing women and how I was pursuing women, and the subtle undertones of manipulation that I was using that I was being driven by sex. Now, there's nothing wrong with being driven by sex.
Mhm.
And this is what I'm talking about. 500,000 years ago was a different story. We needed to procreate. We needed to develop a family, create a family with strength in numbers, you know. Yes, there was a time of vulnerability there, but if we could sustain that time, we would then have adults that we would have in our tribe. Strength in numbers was a real thing. Now it's a little bit different. And so you have to experience it for yourself, but it's very important for them because we form addictions around our sexuality because of the short-term gratification, because of the instant gratification, because of the avoidance of uncomfortable things. It's easy to put your hand on your cock, watch some pornography and ejaculate. It's an easy fix. I know men that do that multiple times a day. And that becomes their norm. And that's a form of avoidance. You're not really living life. There's an emptiness to that.
Yeah.
And so there's great importance in practicing abstinence in different ways, whether it's an ejaculatory abstinence, you know, you start to learn to master your body in different levels, in different ways as well. That's very important. Whilst you're having sex and moving, and the breath practice that's required, the level of presence that's required when having sex and purposely not ejaculating and pulling that in, the level of presence that's required for you and to not disconnect from your partner at the same time. That's a massive practice. But what that does to your character is it builds a great deal of resilience and focus and awareness and presence. That's powerful.
Could you maybe explain exactly for yourself how your attitude or behavior towards women changed?
Yes, I stopped objectifying them,
Mm-hmm.
and I began to see them beyond just an opportunity to have sex with them. So instead of going into a conversation or a meeting of such, even if it was a date, the end goal wasn't to have sex. The end goal was to just actually be here and now and in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that completely changed how I spoke to them. I wasn't saying things and I wasn't never purposely being manipulative. It was the subtleties that I started to notice. It was the unconscious subtleties. So instead of saying things that I thought would impress them and I was waiting for them to say things that I could then respond to, I wasn't waiting to respond. I was just really listening. And that level of attentiveness, it actually brought a deeper attraction to us.
Mm-hmm.
That was beautiful. I didn't have an agenda. I didn't objectify them. I started subjectifying them for who they were, as they were. Not interested in having sex because that's not what I was there for. I could appreciate their physical and aesthetic beauty, and I could leave it at that. I learned to actually appreciate beauty without having to fuck them or have sex with them or have them fuck me or whatever. Well, we really moved past that. And that was a very important, pivotal point for me. Really pivotal, man, because I changed my entire attitude towards myself and towards women.
But how does sexuality then happen? It's just something which naturally evolves out of the conversation, or?
Yeah, well, you can still pursue sexuality, but I became far more honest and transparent with my intention. So, for example, I would say, I'm really enjoying this conversation and I really, really find you physically attractive. And I just really want you to know that because that's what I'm feeling right now. We don't have to have sex. We don't have to be physical, but I just really want you to know. And I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. And I would say it at a time and in a way that I knew, not that I knew it would be received, but I knew that it wouldn't offend. So I knew my intention was never to offend or come. I was just very honest in a very safe way. And they could feel that wasn't the primary intention.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I wanted to have sex with them, I would, depending on the person, I would be very transparent and very honest, but how that would be communicated would be in different ways. Sometimes it would be very subtle, but the intention was very clear. Sometimes it would be very, very overt. Hey, I'd love to have sex with you. I'd love for us to have sex and be physical and be intimate. Is that something that it depends, it would depend on the woman.
Yes.
Sometimes it would be a process of courting. And it would be, but I got to a point where I didn't want that. I wanted more intimate, emotional connection before I even got to the physical. And so that would be the focus point, would be get to know each other in different ways outside of physicality.
Mm-hmm.
it would just be a very honest conversation. Sometimes it would be a courting, would be a toing and froing, and that would be really sexy. And that would be the flirting, and that may go on for days or weeks. And that was part of it, and that was fine. It wasn't all, I have to get to completion. I have to be inside of it, and I have to ejaculate, and then I've won. Then I'm that. But that's how we operate as men, because
totally.
masculine energy is completion. It's an energy of completion, and when that gets into its extreme, or it's hyper, or it's unhealthy because it's too much of it, we become hyper dominant and sometimes hyper aggressive and hyper focused to the point where it's at the detriment of missing the moment. And the feminine thrives in presence. She thrives in the now. And so we have to take all of that into consideration and account.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. So when you reach this level of consciousness and then you work with people who ejaculate several times a day to porn, which steps can they take, or which steps are you teaching to get out of? I imagine it's a hard and long way out of this addictive behavior.
Yeah, so when I'm working with people on a one-on-one basis, and this is part of, their symptoms, because it's a symptom, it's not a cause. Okay, so I start to unpack the causes, and ultimately, what are they running from and what are they avoiding? What are they distracted? What are they trying to distract themselves from? What pain or wound or set of fears are they distracted, or experiences or old memories are they distracting themselves from? So really just help men develop trust with me and a sense of safety and an ability for them to actually express more openly. And that's really where we start. I don't even worry about the porn. You want to keep masturbating, keep masturbating. You want to keep watching porn, keep watching porn. I'm not going to say to them, stop watching porn. I'm going to say to them, be more mindful of what's happening when you go to do it. What's happening in your day? Are you angry? Are you sad? Are you upset? Are you frustrated? Are you tense? I'll ask them to observe. I'll ask them to be mindful of what's happening in their surroundings and in their internal self, and even take notes on that. But I'm not going to ask them to stop straight away. There's no point in that. It's a waste of time. They may be strong-minded. They can stop for a day, a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, whatever. But if it's always here at the back of the head, waiting to jump from the opportunity when they have permission, then it's pointless. It's about unpacking and dealing with the core wounding that's driving that behavior.
And how do you find the core wounding out?
I have various techniques and modalities that I use. It's challenging to explain here, but it's challenging because it varies for every person, is different. I have various tools that I use. So part of that framework first is creating a sense of safety and open communication. Let's be very honest with each other. And in order to be really honest, we have to create safety in our environment, in our world. So I non-judgment, compassion, I practice that. I reflect that back to the man. Then I ask specific questions about his past, about his patterns, about what ails him, about his joys. It's a life audit that we go through, and then we start to unpack from there. And then I use tools. There's psychosomatic, sexual somatic tools that I use. There's mind tools, cognitive emotional tools that I use, such as whether it be hypnosis, whether it be journeying work, whether it be NLP as an example, whether it be more traditional Western psychology. I'm versed in so many different areas. It just depends on the individual and what's going to work best for him.
Well, yeah, I think this is something which somebody who's interested has to discover in a one-on-one coaching. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I talked recently to a Tantra coach, and she said that, for example, the kings in the ancient kings had all huge sexual energy, and that sexual energy is life energy, and as you said as well, and it's very important to make this a priority in your life, to have healthy sexual energy. And also, I think the whole sacred masculinity idea, not only the sexuality belongs to it. So, because you're a businessman and entrepreneur yourself, how do you see that impacting your business, your consciousness, your strength, that you know your purpose, that you have a mission?
Yes, I don't deny my sexuality. I embrace it. And I used to deny it in different ways, and it would come out in the shadow. So it would be in pornography, it would be in prostitution, it would be being unfaithful when I was in my relationships. It would be this incessant appetite for women and sex, and I was trying to fill this void, and the void that I was trying to fill was not, it was unrealistic. It was a pain and wounding that I hadn't dealt with. It was issues around freedom and emotional intimacy that I thought I would be able to find through superficial connection or surface level connection. And so I did a lot of work around that. But to go back to your question, I embrace my sexuality and I embrace my sexual life force energy, and I use it to be creative. That doesn't mean I suppress it or deny it. It means that, you know, when I am practicing abstinence deliberately for whatever period of time, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year, whatever it may be, I'm very directed with that energy. I play with it through the breath. I feel it. I sit with it. I pay attention to it. I then redirect it into my into creative energy, in creating programs, in ideation of my business, in serving others and helping others. I don't see it or feel it as a frustration. I see it as an energy boost. And so I'm able to do that because I believe in that within myself, and I hold that very true within myself.
Mhm. And how does it your consciousness, how does it impact your business decisions, maybe your strategy, your decisions? Yeah.
It's everything. I mean, the way I see myself is the way I behave in my business. If I don't believe in who I am, if I don't see myself with clarity, then it leaks out into my business and into my service.
Mhm.
So I need my level of consciousness and understanding and connection and feeling of self to be clear. And when it's not, I welcome that, because that's an opportunity for growth and up leveling. And that I'm very grateful for. So I stay there and I learn from it.
But the clarity is the goal. To have clarity is the goal.
That's part of it. Yes, part of it.
Mhm. Okay. I would like to go into relationships a little bit. I mean, in our society, the kind of default relationship is the monogamous relationship. But obviously, there are lots of different variations as well. And I, for example, know a lot of men. I mean, I know obviously the male side of my friends who are in relationships, but they are not happy. And then are often there are kids involved. And often I think the best way of a relationship for them would be an open relationship, because the attraction, even with working on it, seems to go down in the one-on-one relationship. What is your opinion on that, and what your insights and your experiences?
Yeah. So my opinion, first and foremost, is that monogamy or non-monogamy is not bad nor good. It will suit a particular type of person, and it may not suit another type. There's no one size fit all. There's no evolved model here. It really depends on the individual and where they're at in life and what their values are, what they want. There are so many variables that fit into the fit of that for the individual. Um, for me, there's pros in non-monogamy and there's pros in monogamy. And it's important to understand that monogamy in today's definition of monogamy is one partner at a time. Whereas the traditional or the original definition of monogamy was one partner for life, full stop. Monogamy is not really defined that way these days. It's different. It's defined as you're with someone, that's the only person you're with, and you set the boundaries around that. So you're not sexual with anyone else. You're not emotionally involved with anyone else. You're just with that person. For me, there's a beauty and a depth that comes with monogamous relationships in contemporary times. And there's an ability to go really, really deep. There's no out. So there's a vulnerability that can transpire because there's no out. There's no option of, oh, I can go be intimate with someone else and I can avoid or forget about the issues that we're facing here. Or I have the permission to focus my energy elsewhere, which deters me from focusing on what's present right now. So there's something really beautiful about that in terms of our growth, because we grow in relationship. Now, non-monogamous or open relationships can have that as well. I just don't know to what degree. I haven't been in open relationships enough to really know that. Because I think at a subtle level within our understanding the mind the way that I do, that unconsciously there's always that out. There's always that, oh, I can avoid this, I can move away from this, I can shift it, you know. And so I don't know about that. But there's it's I don't have an opinion on bad or good. It really isn't. Sometimes people like to pinhole me or pigeonhole me into, oh, you know, is monogamy better than non-monogamy? Yes. Oh, so that means non-monogamy is not better than monogamy? No. Oh, so that means non-monogamy is better than monogamy? Yes. It depends on you as an individual, right? It really does. All I will say is this: honesty and transparency in any relationship dynamic is number one. Have to be very honest and transparent with what you want with clarity. That has been the biggest lesson in personal experiences that I've learned, because I've come from a place of being completely dishonest and out of integrity. And that is not healthy for anyone involved. Doesn't matter what your relationship type is or structure or the container that you hold, honesty is everything. Because you got to understand, some non-monogamous, for example, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Some non-monogamous, they may be together, and their rules of engagement or their guidelines or how they wish to be is, hey, you can have sex with as many people as you want, but you have to wear a condom. You don't even need to tell me. That's their container. That's the container they hold. Great. And then all of a sudden that person is doing that, but he or she have sex without protection, without a condom, as an example. That is massively dishonest. That's quote unquote cheating, because they made an agreement and that agreement was then broken. And so agreements and honoring the agreements, everything. And if the agreements don't suit you, then reevaluate them with your partner. Have the courage to do that. And they're very difficult conversations. And it's harder to do that than, sit and just watch porn and just avoid it.
It's true.
As an
Just
example,
maybe,
I'm not demonizing porn. I don't want to demonize porn.
No,
I just use that as an example.
just an example.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's maybe easy to agree not to have sex with somebody else, but it's very difficult to agree not to be emotionally connected to somebody or not fall in love. I mean, it's something maybe you cannot control. I mean, not having sex, it's easy. You can just tell yourself, okay, I want it, but I don't do it. But not to have the emotional connection to somebody, that's very hard to promise to somebody, I think. Yeah. Yes. Good. In your courses, you're offering, I think, development courses like, for example, the Conscious Warrior or Reclaim Your Kingdom. It sounds extremely attractive to be a conscious warrior or to be a king. What is behind these concepts?
Essentially, it's a roadmap for enhancing our connection to self, for understanding ourselves at deeper levels as men, for moving out of being in a dissatisfied life into a satisfied, fruitful, joyful, meaningful life. These programs help us find meaning as men and help us develop connection in ourselves and with others. That's the foundation of these programs. It helps us cultivate a purposeful meaning to life, helps us cultivate connection in our relationships, helps us understand what's important to us, helps us understand and know and be able to practice principles of physical wellness, emotional wellness, and spiritual evolution. These are the foundations of the program.
And let's say somebody masters this, has very deep knowledge about himself and has a purpose, is following the purpose, is emotionally healthy, sexually healthy. What is the right, okay, we talk about heterosexual relationships. What is the right female counterpart for this? Are there women working on these? Because I think the typical mainstream feminism is not really the right counterpart to this man, is it?
I agree with you. No, I don't believe it is. No.
Yeah. So
no, because, but again, it depends how you define feminism. Because some people would define feminism as quote unquote equal rights. And that's very different to all men are bad and they've oppressed us for so long, it's time now to oppress them. Because like in any movement, there's always extremes.
Mhm.
And in feminism, in the feminist movement, there are some of those extremes that exist. But I don't think they're an accurate representation of what feminism stands for. I mean, feminism, the essence of feminism essentially is equal rights, access to equal resources. It's a matter of equity, not equality, because we're not equal, we're different. And it's okay to be different, but it's very important that we have equal rights and that we have access to resources at an equity.
Mhm.
So it depends how you define feminism. But to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. There are women, again, we're talking normative heterosexual binary relationships here. There are women that are doing that deep work, meeting healthy men where they're at. Absolutely. And that's them cultivating their natural feminine essence. Part of that is meeting these men with compassion and forgiveness and non-judgment for themselves, for men, for humanity, for being able to be in their femininity, to be inward, to be vibrant, to be sustainable in their actions, to be caring, to have a softness in their movement, in their communication, to practice being collaborative and being trusting and responsive and vulnerable and balanced in their perspectives. I mean, there's so many different aspects of healthy feminine expression.
Mhm. Great. Thank you a lot for these insights. I think it's a great road to take as a man and as a woman. There's a big movement behind it.
Mm,
Also, I'm always hearing Jordan Peterson as a name.
mm.
Masculinity is mentioned. Why is he? Because first I always heard his name in relation to politics, but then all of a sudden he appeared also when I looked into masculinity. Why has he such an important role in this movement?
I just believe he speaks to a particular audience. It's interesting, he speaks to an audience of culture and what's happening in our culture today, and he really simplifies more complex academic notions of how we relate to each other and how we behave in business and family and relationships. And I think because of the way he simplifies it, he attracts a particular audience. And that's not that men are simple people or the simple gender. It's because it just makes a lot of sense to how to live life for so many men out there. And I really admire Jordan Peterson. Have I delved deep and deep and deep into his work? I would say no. Maybe I've listened to, in terms of podcasts or in terms of audios with him involved, I've maybe listened to, I don't know, 20 hours, 30 hours maybe. So it's not nothing, but not a great deal either. That's potentially 3 or 4 books maybe, that he's written per se, the equivalent of. But I do value him, and I just think he's appealing to a culture that's, here's what it is. He says it how it is for him. He doesn't bullshit, and he's straight down the line. And I think that's very appealing. And I think that's very attractive to most people, full stop. That's what it is.
I understand.
And he also speaks truth. I think a lot of what he says is very relevant. And it's debunking why we behave and understanding that in simple terms. And that's very helpful for people.
Yeah, many men between 20 and 30 particular mention his
Yes.
name when they talk about change or
Yes.
inspiration. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So Stefanos, what kind of, so if people are interested, what kind of services exactly are you offering? I mean, we talked about one-on-one coaching, we talked about your retreats, I think. These are retreats,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Immersive experiences, retreats, yes.
Mm-hmm. What is that what people can look into when they want to work with you? One-on-one coaching and
Absolutely.
retreats? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a number. So I have online products or online programs that they can learn. I have virtual programs that are live for the ladies that are listening. We have an amazing program called Be the Queen, myself, my wife, and I. And that is really for single women, largely for single women that are just really looking to up-level their relationships and their lives and attract that king. And so what work do they need to do within themselves to be able to attract the best possible scenarios and situations and people in their lives? I have men's programs, Be the King, Reclaim Your Kingdom, The Conscious Man. There's so many different programs there. Online, in person, I do 2-day events, 3-day events, 5-day and 7-day immersive experiences, and one-on-one coaching and corporate speaking as well. So there's many different avenues. Just jump on my website, stefanossafandos.com, or you can see me on any social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Stefanos Safandos.
Perfect. I'm following you on Instagram too, and
Thank you.
I listen to you on different podcasts as well. And I will look into the programs myself. I can only recommend to look into them. And I thank you for being here. And I also want to acknowledge you for being a role model for young and middle-aged men today to be healthy, to follow their purpose, and to have deep connections with other men.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it deeply.
Thank you. So thanks for listening. If you liked this conversation, you can also book a one-on-one coaching call with me. I will listen to your case and give you my advice. My advice will be more business, less masculinity. For masculinity, check out Stefan Sifandos. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.